Yo, what's up, aliens? AHEE here with another tutorial. So today I wanted to talk about creating energy in bass music. There's a couple different ways that we can go about doing this, but usually the main ways of doing it is through compression and distortion, and also being able to EQ things so that way that it's brighter. Usually more high-end content means higher energy, but not always. It's a combination of all these things, and you don't want to overdo any one of these things. It's a good balance between compression, distortion, and the EQing. So to demonstrate this, we're going to go over my track Bass in Your Face, which is on my new Starbreak EP, which if you haven't, definitely go check it out. Put a lot of effort and energy. I think it does a really good job of being fun and powerful at the same time. So let's go over the vocal section here real quick.
Bass in your face, in your face, in your face, got the bass in your face, in your face, in your face, got the bass in your face, in your face, in your face, got the bass in your face, in your face, in your face, got the bass in your face, 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 in your face,
Cool. Yeah, so there's a ton of energy in that vocal. And I wanted to talk about a few of the ways that it actually has that much energy. First of all, this is actually my voice. I'll show y'all. So this is what it sounds like without all the processing on there.
Bass in your face, in your face, in your face, got the bass in your face, in your face.
Now with the processing.
Bass in your face, in your face, in your face, got the bass.
And I actually want to show y'all here. I'll show y'all the original. It's actually pitched down for semitones. So if we listen to the original, it sounds like this.
Bass in your face, in your face, in your face, got the bass in your face, in your...
Not nearly as intense. Pitching down my vocals a little bit to be in the key of the song. And then also here, the vocal processing chain. So let's go over what all this is. First off, I said earlier, don't use OTT on vocals, but I just feel like I've changed my mind. It's totally cool to have OTT on vocals. It's just I could hear how it can really destroy a dynamic vocal performance, but in this particular case, I don't want a dynamic vocal performance. I want just hard-hitting vocals. So with that said, I have OTT on there. Next up, I've got Isotope, which all this is really doing is I'm using the de-esser, and I just have it pulled down all the way. And then, yeah, the EQ's not even doing anything. So it's really just acting as a de-esser. Next, I have the Wrap Vocalizer plugin, which this is a series of compression, reverb, EQing, and distortion using the overdrive. This one is probably the main sound. So here it is without the Wrap Vocalizer.
Bass in your face, in your face, in your face, got the bass in your face, in your face, in your face, got the...
So you can see that's where most of all the sound is coming from. I got a little bit more OTT on after that. The distortion almost brings up too much of this, like 2000 hertz. So I brought that down. And again, I think I had exaggerated it a bit more. This is a cool thing with the Ableton EQ is that, you know, usually the scale is at 100. And I felt like I exaggerated it too much. And so you can pull down on the scale to back off of that. And then also this is another de-esser. Again, doing more EQing, bringing up the middle band. And yeah, so let's look at the shape of the difference between the before and after. Here's the shape of the before.
Bass in your face, in your face, in your face, got the...
So you can see it's got the low end in there. The mid-range is the highest bit here. It doesn't have very much information in the high end. And so again, we got rid of a lot of the dynamics. We de-essed it, though also distorted it a bunch. And so here is the shape after.
Bass in your face, in your face, in your face, got the bass in your face.
A very, very different shape. You can see that the high end here is the most prominent part of the song. Just a lot of harmonics were added with that distortion in there, and then you can see that the sub bass was cut out. Another really big aspect that I think is overlooked sometimes is the delivery of the vocals. So here, without all the effects on there, here's that original vocal again.
Bass in your face, in your face, in your face, got the...
I had done a couple takes, and here's one of the earlier takes that honestly wasn't as good.
Bass in your face, get your face in your face, got the bass in your face.
You can hear that my vocal delivery is not as aggressive as it is on this one.
Bass in your face, in your face, in your face, got the bass. face, in your face, get your face, in your face.
And also my vocal, I was just like a little bit, I wasn't, I put a little bit of push into my vocal delivery there. Another really big thing about adding energy with compression, again, is here in the drums. I have this magic box on here. Usually I'll have it before the limiter, but in this case, I just thought it sounded better after. Here, the limiter really isn't, well, it's doing something here on the drop. But I don't have the gain up. I haven't messed with anything. It's just sort of as it is, default settings. And now here I'll turn off the magic box and we'll hear the difference. Now with it. You can hear that it really brings out that metallic shine on it, and it just like sort of glues all the sounds together a bit more cohesively. And here we can watch the build and the interplay between the cymbals, this break beat, and the snares here. So we'll listen to all these two groups together. So you can see here on the drum group, just this last section right here, there's an automation on the EQ to take out that low end, which I think is always a really good way to enhance the contrast between no bass and bass, like to emphasize the bass coming back in on the drop. And you can see the just like the da 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 kind of pattern. Also here on the breaks, it's interesting. Here it is with the processing. And now without it. I don't know if y'all can hear that really big boominess in the bass. We've put an OTT on it and then cut out that low boom here with the EQs and then sort of duck down some of that high end there. And again, duck down more high end right here. But yeah, adding in that OTT compression really helps make the drums way more energetic. I just want to point out one more time that I'm not boosting the gain within the fab filters. A lot of people are asking me questions about seeing my settings here, and the idea is just to have it as a ceiling. So that way you can then have these multiple ceilings for different groups. This one right here, if we look at how the drums hit, the drums don't even reach the limiter. So I could probably take that one off. It wouldn't really make that much of a difference, but I think there's at some point in which it does catch a peak or two like that. And also here, if we look at the drums during the build, this main group of drums during the build, it doesn't really hit the peaks, but then it really hits the peaks here once the drop hits. It catches a few here and there. You just keep on pushing up the volume of your snare. Well, then when that, you can really see it catches those snares there. Yeah, and you'll see why it catches those snares so intensely is because look, I've got this crazy volume automation on the transient of the snare. You can't even see it, it's going so fast, but it's like a 15 dB boost right here on the transient. Yeah. It just helps push it against the limiter a little bit harder for that little bit of time. So here within the group itself, I've got all my different drum elements at different levels. Like I have this snare here at 0, but this snare itself is, that part's at 0 too, but you can see it's not actually hitting 0 in the actual sound itself. And here this part of the metal snares at like negative 8.2, but like it doesn't really matter so much. It's just listening to how it layers in with everything else in the group. By having this limiter on here, it catches the peaks, so that way the elements in the group don't get caught by this limiter, because say you have all these sounds going on but want to get your snare louder, hit triggers the master limiter, that's going to make everything else quieter in the song. And you might not necessarily want that. And also it's going to affect like your bass, your sub level may go down when your snare hits. And I don't want that in this track. I want my bass to be full on the entire time. So yeah, that's why I use this trick of, you know, having the pre-master with the limiter on it and then sending other things just directly to the master, like the vocals. All right, so let's go over the processing of this bass sound. So here it is. Here's what it sounds like without all that processing on it. Check it out. I'll solo it. Now with the processing. Very different effects. So how we got there was through a combination of a lot of different processing that slowly made the final sound. I have all these off right now so that way my CPU doesn't overload. So you can see here that I actually have the sub bass cut out of the sound. And also I just have a limiter on here. I have ozone and I have the sub bass going all the way in mono. That was before I decided to cut out the sub bass. These like low mids, I've made them a little bit more mono, and the high ends I've kept wide. I've also done some mid-side EQ processing, so that way I'm cutting some of the sides and I'm boosting some of the mids. Again, this was like a very wide sound in the initial part of it, and so I wanted to give it a more center focus. Here I'm cutting out some of the tip top of the high end. Here I'm boosting some of the mid frequencies in that 1,000 to 2,000 hertz range, which is like the main human hearing spectrum. I have the transient designer on here that's doing quite a bit. It basically is compressing the sound a lot. Again, more compression here. You'll start to see a lot of the sound is compression, OTT, phaser. This is actually the early version of the growl bass processor. I've changed it up a little bit since then. And then I have the multiband amp, which is where a lot of the character is coming from. All these are part of my Magic Ableton racks. This is essentially different types of amps, and the amps are being distorted at different bands. I've got two different distortion types, one on the top end, one on the low end. And then also just compressing the original sound. The original sound actually came from my Prophet X. And here if we look inside of span, yeah, you can see the sound's actually out of phase originally. And then I had to put that isotope ozone on there to bring it back into phase. Yeah. But yeah, that's a pretty big difference. You can see the distortion has really brought out those upper harmonics. So this is with the processing and then without the processing. Totally different shape. You can see we cut out that sub, like I said, boosted these mid-range. Oh, that's why I boosted that 1,000 to 2,000 hertz range, was to get this up into that more even shape. And then also I must have cut some of this up here because all the distortion was adding in a bunch of harmonics in this range as well. But hopefully you can see my process on how to get from one shape to the other. And then for the actual sub bass, I created the sine wave in Serum. Yeah. Oh, you know what it is? It's a sine wave in Serum, but I've got the third harmonic in it. Yeah, you can see that. So that's the frequency you're going to be able to hear on iPhone speakers and whatnot. Because these notes won't show up on iPhone. But this is what you'll hear on big sub sound systems. And I had someone ask me about the cutoff frequency, and really I don't pay too much attention other than just looking in span at where the notes are and visually seeing where I should cut them off. Yes, it was a very long question, and it's way simpler than you imagine. So without that low cut in there. So you can see here's that sub frequency here, but I wanted just a pure sine tone there. And so I guess what frequency did I cut it off there? 110. Yeah, so 110 is going to be about right here. Yeah, so I just wanted to basically visually chop this off. If y'all get Span and start learning how to use it visually, you're going to be able to answer so many of your own questions just with this. It's so good. I keep on saying it all over and over again, but it's true. Also, real quick, I've got this little riser in here. Yeah, and then it cuts out right there. So you can see that it's basically a saw wave that basically goes up in pitch, but also as it's going up in pitch, it's becoming more and more detuned. So it's like a saw wave with multiple voices in it, and it's becoming more and more detuned. And also the reverb amount is increasing as well, the higher it gets. I think I made that in Serum. I had to freeze it here for this tutorial just because CPU overload. If y'all enjoyed this, please click a like and hit that subscribe button. And if you're really enjoying the energy in this, I definitely recommend checking out the full EP. I will provide a link to that below. Also below, I will provide a link to all the Magic Ableton racks that I've been using in this. That includes things like the Magic Box, the Rap Vocalizer, the multi-band amp, the growl bass processor is in the Magic Rack add-ons. So I'll provide a link below where you can get all the Magic Racks and where you can download the Starbreak EP that's out on Stylist's record label, Sleeveless Records. Got a collab on there with my friend Kota, who's also a really dope producer. But with those three elements, you'll be able to add in so much more energy into your tracks. All right, peace aliens.